That's why we don't want to cut your speaker's time. And we're going to get, is the camera ready? Okay. Your next speaker used to work for the Department of Defense. And he's one of my favorite kind of people. And that is a whistleblower. A guy that blows a whistle on corruption, on criminality, on abuse of power, and does not bend down with pressure. This person is going to talk about a very, very important issue, and that is the use of nuclear warfare right now by the United States government. No, I'm not talking about throwing nuclear bombs on countries and cities. I'm talking about a more insidious and slower form of death by nuclear waste called depleted uranium. Please help me give a warm hand of welcome to your next speaker, Mr. Doug Rokke.
I'm a tired puppy. How many veterans do we have in the audience? Raise your hand. Hey, we got a handful here. Everybody give them a hand. October of 1967, I enlisted in the military for the first time. I'm retired now. I'm disabled. I'm still subject to call to go into the military at any time because of my specialty and expertise. For those of you who are veterans, and maybe some of those are not veterans that watch TV and have watched history and everything else, the purpose of war is strictly to control individuals, control resources, and control terrain. That's it. The purpose of combat, very simply, is to kill and destroy. Right, Woody?
Right.
Woody learned this too well. The purpose of combat is to kill and destroy. And that means, if that soldier's out there, and he doesn't like you, well, even if he does like you, and he gets an order to put a 45 into your ear and pull the trigger, he's going to do it. The combat commander, that individual lieutenant, that NCO, now ladies and gentlemen, I was a sergeant. They used to call me Sergeant Rokke. And 19 years after I first got enlisted, I got promoted to a second lieutenant. I was the oldest second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, 19 years after I started. And you have to understand, 20 years is a career. So I've done multiple careers. We continue to do them. When you go to war, that soldier is John Wayne and he's Rambo, all tied together as one. That soldier does not consider the fact that he may get wounded, that he may get ill, that he may get injured, or that he or she may die. It is irrelevant. And it is irrelevant to the combat commander, that sergeant, that lieutenant, that major, that colonel, on what happens once he has an assigned mission. Reality is, young men and young girls go to war and they die. And they get injured and they become ill. And the reality is, there ain't nothing us doctors can do about it. Or us paramedics. Or the nurses. Nothing you can do about it. That is reality. And when you go to war, and you have injuries, the standard triage that you see and you practice in a medical facility in your community is exactly opposite of the triage that we do in combat. The triage that we do in combat is designed to sustain the fighting force. It is designed entirely to put the greatest number back into the fight. Which means, like we did in Desert Storm, you build yourself what we call a pit. We dig a deep pit. Now, I could show you the photos and the slides and all this stuff from it, but I don't think you're ready for that. And I sure know the combat guys in here don't want to see it again. Because what happens when you triage the individuals, and if they are not breathing or have extensive bleeding or they have extensive traumatic amputations, you throw them in the pit. Yes, ma'am, you let them die. Because you don't have the resources to keep them all alive. You don't have the resources to take care of everybody. Where's Willie? Is he in here? Willie was shocked at the World Trade Center. Willie was shocked when those incredible group of fine men from the Emergency Services Unit of the New York Police and Fire Department made a conscious choice to leave that individual with asthma up there, leave that person with the wheelchair up there, and take care of the people who could walk. Thank God they listened to the training I gave them. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I am one of the Army officers that had the responsibility for training New York's Emergency Services Unit on counterterrorism, weapons of mass destruction, and improvised explosives. That order came down while we were at the U.S. Army Chemical School in the middle 90s. General Wooten got the order. General Wooten went to Colonel Mashburn, who was a commandant, and said, we need it. He came to Captain Chase, who was the head of the White House team. How many people you know there's an Army unit assigned to the White House to protect the White House at all time? The cream of the crop to protect the White House from chemical, biological, and everything else. And we got an order to do it. It was really neat. We were all sitting at the golf course, about 7 o'clock at night. Colonel came up and said, hey guys, yes sir. Hey guys, we need this done. Can you do it? Well, sure we can do it. We've got it mostly put in place. When do you want it, Colonel? 10 o'clock in the morning. Yes, sir. They did their job, but they didn't have the resources, and they didn't have the manpower, and there wasn't a blasted thing you could do when those events occurred anyhow. Reality is. So when we look at wartime, and we look at war over the history of warfare, we can go back to the French-Indian War in the 1750s and 1760s, where smallpox was deliberately used to kill the Indians by infecting blankets and handing them out so that you could win a battle. Geez, it works. And then we leap forward all the years and we come on up to World War II. And in World War II, we made a conscious choice to use nuclear weapons. We also have a written directive, and I got a copy of it up here in my pile, a direct order to use radioactive materials to contaminate air, water, and soil throughout Europe to end the war. Because there were no known respiratory and skin protection methods. There were no known medical treatment for once you're affected. And during that development, we had what we call the downwinders. These are the individuals that were marched out there and sat in the trenches when a bomb went boom. And then we started Project Shad. How many people in here know about Project Shad? Raise your hand. Not many. Project Shad is the deliberate use of chemical and biological munitions on U.S. citizens and military personnel throughout the continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. It continues to this day. Well, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not very knowledgeable on chemtrails because I work in the other areas, but I do know people that work in that, and I've been asked it before, but I have to defer because I don't know. You know, one thing was real interesting on all this stuff, and you have to stop and think for this, and I know the physicians and the other chemists in here understand. Salmonella is particular to eggs and poultry, etc. Ain't nothing in a peanut butter recipe that has salmonella associated with it. Surprise! So we had all of that, and Project Shad continues. Almost 20 years ago, the telephone company was digging a new telephone trench out on East Main Street in Urbana, Illinois. This is where the University of Illinois is. That's where I retired from, along with the Army Reserve and active duty and all that other junk. And all of a sudden, they're digging a trench, and all of a sudden what's that? Because they were digging on U.S. Army property behind the 387th Chemical Corps Company, and they unearthed chemical warfare munitions that had been buried there after they used the munitions on the University of Illinois during the riots. Surprise. Well, Spike and I went into Level A. We had the radios inside. We had communications to my sergeant inside, who had communications over to the majors. Over at the University of Illinois Police Department, they had communications with Washington, and we kind of cleaned it all up. And then they sent a specialized team in from Granite City Arsenal near St. Louis, Missouri, and they took it away. Surprise is, another time, bacillus globagi, all down Anniston Army Depot. They used it all over, zapped everybody. Hey, I got the thing from the colonel. How do we clean this up? What do we do? This is what you got to do. Bye-bye. And it continues. So we did that. Then we go to Vietnam, and as of the last few weeks, there are over 400,000 of us that served in Vietnam that are still affected by Agent Orange and still seeking medical care from the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs that is deliberately and willfully delayed and denied.
Treason.
It's reality. Yeah. All of this stuff, and Agent Orange effects throughout Vietnam is absolutely horrible. I had the sheer joy on my 55th birthday a few years ago. Yeah, I'm in pretty good shape for an old fart. And we got called to Stockholm, Sweden. And the two topics before the Karolinska Institute and the Swedish Parliament, you understand, I'm a Norwegian, okay? Swedes and Norwegians are the same thing, and going to the Swedish Parliament was incredible. And we were directed to talk about the adverse health and environmental effects of uranium emissions and Agent Orange. Well, Agent Orange is a nightmare, and it continues to be. And then we move on up, and we got Gulf War I. Oh, Desert Storm and Desert Shield. All the lies that were told to perpetuate that, get that war started. And ladies and gentlemen, I was in the middle of it. Lock, stock, and barrel. And as we got ready to mobilize all the troops, we decided to give everybody all these immunizations because we knew of all these endemic diseases. We knew of all these medical problems that existed in the desert. It exists when you bring all kinds of people together to camp. You ever go to summer camp? Everybody gets sick when you go to summer camp. You go to the dormitory and you get sick when you go to college. Well, when you bring a whole bunch of soldiers together, not only throughout the United States, but from out the world, you're all going to get sick. So they give them all kinds of immunizations, but they forgot one thing. You can't give 6, 8, 10, and 12 immunizations simultaneously to anybody because the body physiologically can't deal with that. Reality is. But we did it. And then we're going to war, and we got all these lies all put up. But we're going to kill and destroy. The Iraqis have incredible armor. They have incredible weapons. And therefore, we have to use the most effective munitions available. And they made a conscious choice to use uranium munitions. Now, depleted uranium munitions is part of my expertise. My expertise in the military is nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, and nuclear weapons. And yes, I've been to fail-safe with a fully loaded B-52. October of 1969. That's in the Nixon memoirs now. They know it. Everybody knows that. We launched and everything out of Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington. Back at that time, I was a bomb nav hard hat on B-52s. Another lifetime. So they decided to use uranium munitions. In the Gulf War, we had these specific uranium munitions available for use. We had the 20 millimeter fired by the Navy Phalanx. We had the 30 millimeter fired by the A-10 Warthog aircraft. An absolutely incredible weapon. The A-10 is an incredible aircraft. It kills everything it hits. That Gaui 8 gun is awesome. And then we had a 105 millimeter DU round. We had a 120 millimeter DU round. And then the British and the Israelis had a 125 millimeter DU round. Awesome stuff. Now, these are kinetic energy penetrators. These are gigantic rods of uranium. Think about a gigantic dart. A 120 millimeter DU rod is approximately 3/4 of an inch in diameter, 18 inches long, and every single rod is over 10 pounds of solid uranium. Uranium-238 is the primary isotope. Then you have uranium-234, uranium-235. You have uranium-236 from the reprocessing of DOE facilities from reactor junk. Then you have plutonium, neptunium, and americium. It ain't good stuff. And when you fire a uranium rod, a DU rod, it flies through the air at extremely high velocity. And as it flies through the air at extremely high velocity, it is on fire. It is burning. And it impacts any single thing that it impacts, and you have a catastrophic secondary explosion due to ignition of fuels or anything, and explosives, and due to concussion, which causes catastrophic explosions. There ain't nothing better. It is the silver bullet. It is extraordinarily effective against armor. It is extraordinarily effective against a car or a truck. It is absolutely awesome against an apartment building. And it's absolutely incredible against hotels and motels where U.S. journalists and everybody else have to be, especially in downtown Baghdad. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to show you a video now of what DU looks like. This is from my test in Nevada test site in Mercury, Nevada. It's all set. We got to do is just put it in, push play, and move it up to the screen. Okay, while he's doing that. The other rounds that we have, in addition to the kinetic energy penetrators, at that time, were what we call the ADAM and the PDAM. These are acronyms, ADAM and PDM. These are cluster bombs. These are landmines. They are small. They are filled with high explosive. They have a uranium casing. And they're incredible. Now, how many people have read about the cluster bombs that the Israelis used in Lebanon? ADAM and a PDAM. Isn't it nice what we give them? We sent them the bunker busters and the ADAM and the PDAM for that battle, but we didn't have it back at that time. So, now what we have, we got the ADAM and the PDAM. Now we come up as we start going. We use approximately 275 tons of solid uranium incorporated into munitions during Gulf War I. First time. Now, we already knew how it was going to work because we had given it to the Israelis in 1973 and 1974 when they used it against the Egyptians in the Sinai. We got all the medical evidence, we got all the on-site measurements, I even got the photographs of destroyed tanks. No biggie. Then we did Desert Storm. Then we used approximately 375 tons and left a trashed mess. After the completion, in December of 1990, while we're getting ready for it, you have to understand, I'm already over there. Bowers Raiders has already been formed. We are the theater nuclear, biological, chemical warfare teaching and special response team. We reported to D.G. Zulis, the theater medical commander, and he reported to Storm and Norman, okay, direct. There ain't nothing in between, babe. And what happened is in December of 1990, I got a letter from the Pentagon in the United States mail, because you understand, they ain't going to trust the Army message system. We all know how that works. We had a fine young E4 up here testified on how that worked. Talked about it yesterday. Is that ready? We are ready. Okay, let's put press. Play. Okay, this is a T-72 with a single 120 round impact. All that dust coming off of there is DU. I have no explosives. I have no munitions. Now we're going inside. This is inside of the T-72 tank with that same impact. What you have as that uranium round enters, you break up in fine particles. You have a firestorm of burning uranium. Burning uranium. And everything that's in there will go crispy critter in a heartbeat. Everything in there gets pulverized, and if you have explosives or fuel in there, it would have been a catastrophic explosion. Well, when I'm doing my testing, you have to understand, I ain't going to put no explosives in there or fuel because I want to find out what happens. So I got nothing to go boom or burn. I just got steel. But I did all this stuff, the cloud, the impact, and now it's just burning uranium, burning and burning and burning and burning and burning. This is real time. How would you like to be in there when it's hit? How would you like to be the majority of the casualties from Desert Storm that died and were wounded in Desert Storm? They were friendly fire. They were not wounded in action or killed in action by the Iraqis. They were wounded in action and killed in action by our own. Now here we're going to a T-72 again. Isn't that neat? One single round. All that's uranium dust. It just gets together and it goes on downwind. And it keeps going and going and going. And it distributes all over. And so when I did this testing and wrote the Army regulations signed by General Eric Shinseki, Chief of Staff of the Army, that is in force as we speak, requires full respiratory and skin protection within 50 meters for eternity until it's cleaned up. Isn't that, man, that BMP just has a nice day. It just doesn't have a good day whatsoever. And we'll just let it run because I'm going to get to some night shots. So what we did is we went up there and we were directed to collect all of the U.S. friendly fire Abrams and Bradleys that were hit with uranium munitions. I had to provide medical care. We had to set up medical care. We had to identify it. We had to collect it. We had to measure it. We had to secure it. We had to package it, and we had to transport it. Because I couldn't leave those Abrams tanks in the desert. Now here we're going to a night shot. Isn't that awesome? Man, this stuff's good. That's all burning uranium. You saw the DU round, 120 round coming in from the right side of the screen, and it hits, and it burns, and it burns, and it burns, and it burns, and it burns. If you watch TV, you see it every day. Baghdad, Afghanistan, the Balkans are littered with this stuff. Kuwait was littered with it before. Lebanon. You've seen it. Now, watch very closely the color of the impact of the DU round on the tank. Now, think about what David asked you last night. What was the color of the flash on the World Trade Center prior to the impact of the aircraft? Duh. It doesn't take a whole lot to figure this out. You notice here, and it's very distinctive, uranium burns and it burns and it burns and it burns. Now there's uranium fragments that are on fire, there are uranium fragments that are not on fire, and they just continue to go. And they're spread all over the place. And what we learned when we did all the research, you can stop that now, that's enough. Does everybody understand how this works now? Is there any questions about it? You see it every day, you watch it on TV, now you've seen the research that I did. But you have to understand, the U.S. Army said I was never there. You can go to Wikipedia, and they have altered my entry. They state that I wasn't there, I wasn't director, I was not sick, and nothing of this ever happened. God bless them. Our records are all gone.
Doug, how did you survive?
How did we survive? The question is, how did we survive? It's real easy. God. I don't need to say anything more. So we're putting this all together and we're trying to get everything. We did all the cleanup. Ladies and gentlemen, when you go to war, your job is to kill and destroy. When you're a medic, your job is to save lives, isn't it, Woody? Yes. And when you're a medic, you realize that you can't always save lives. So sometimes you pick up the body parts. You know what it's like to pick up American soldiers with a 6-inch putty knife, scrape their brains off the side of a Bradley or an Abrams and put them into a plastic bag and bury them? Not nice, Dave. That's reality. You see the Iraqis as crispy critters. You see the Americans as crispy critters. You see the children as crispy critters. I mean, put the turkey in the oven and burn it all day long, and you don't even come close. And the aromas are beyond comprehension. And the protection, the respiratory protective, the M40, the M17, all the M25, none of this respiratory protection, the DOE, none of this will protect you. It will not work. And they know it, and they don't care. And Dr. Michael Kilpatrick, Deputy Secretary of Defense in charge of deployment medicine, who's basically in charge of medical care for all the soldiers right now, and all his minions say, all you got to do is wear a little old surgical mask. Well, Doc, a surgical mask is good for spit, maybe, right, sir? That's about it. That's the extent of it. And so you have all of these significant problems that you have to consider and what you have to work with. And how do you deal with this? So we come back, we're putting all the reports together. I order medical care for everybody immediately. My director for medical care, again, got me a whole bunch of medals. You know, I got enough medals, man. I had to wear crutches on my arms, but it doesn't get you anything, and I guarantee it doesn't get you medical care. We have a young lady here that's got a Purple Heart from 911, and she can't even get medical care right now. And the doctor that tries to tell her she's crazy is the same doctor that tries to tell me I'm crazy. Same doctor. Colonel Charles Ingle, Walter Reed Army Medical Center, Washington, D.C. I think everybody knows by now Walter Reed ain't giving medical care to people. Walter Reed is put people into roach-infested, cockroach, and rat-infested places, and they don't care. Reality is. So anyhow, we came back, we started writing all our reports up, putting everything together, trying to get it all done. Didn't get a whole lot done. We got direct written orders to provide medical care to everybody involved. They're not doing it. We can't even get medical care for ourselves. And all those orders that we issued back in 1991, yeah, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it's right here. Dr. Bernard Roske, Deputy Secretary of Defense under Billy Clinton. Let me tell you, Billy Clinton is not a nice guy. And Hillary was the president, and she is not a nice guy. They know exactly what's happened, and they've done everything they can to stop it. Facts are. I used to have hellacious arguments with Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House. So anyhow, we got this done, and what happened, some years later, Dr. Bernard Roske sent a letter to me, personal letter. It's up here and said, hey, back at that time, the doctors and everybody decided we didn't need to do medical care for anybody affected by DU. And I go, wait a minute. I issued the directive. I got a medal. The theater medical commando issued an order with all the names on it, and you tell us we didn't do it. Thank you very much. Well, we get together, and we're putting everything together, getting our reports together. In January of 1992, I get ordered back onto active duty to go before the Secretariat at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for a major medical conference where they're bringing all the gurus of military medicine into one place. And I told them what the problems were. They need medical care and they need to do this. They listened. They listened. And Assistant Secretary of the Army Walker in December of 1992 issued a directive to start the U.S. Army Environmental Policy Institute study on depleted uranium. And it was really neat when we started this study because one of the written directives in here was, quote, you have to understand this all. The Senate Appropriations Committee report number 102-408 contains specific language directing your institute to conduct a study on the health and environmental consequences of depleted uranium on battlefield, 1. The remediation technologies which might be developed, 2, and the ways in which the toxicity of depleted uraniums may be reduced. Now, if those idiot senators know that DU is toxic, and they told the Secretary of the Army to study it and fix it, I think everybody knows it, including the President, and he did. Well, it didn't happen. Well, then we got over there and we started this work, and I'm already doing the work for Cyril because the Army was found in willful violation of NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act. Y'all, where's Doug? He can come on back, that long-haired hippie at the university. Y'all have him come on back. He can fix things. He can write training curriculums. He's got all the buddies. They'll figure out how to clean up because they're super garbage men. We need somebody to pick up the trash, scrape up the bodies, and bury them in the bags. They'll do it. They'll download the explosives and the munitions. D.O.D. won't go near it. But those guys are nutty. They're a whole bunch of old NCOs, a whole bunch of old enlisted. They're now officers. All you do is give them an order, and they, yes, sir, we go do it. Somebody asked why we did it. Willie knows. It's real simple. Somebody's got to do it. And if you don't do it, people die. And you are Rambo and you're John Wayne, you just disregard those facts. So anyhow, somebody told me Madeleine Albright's coming to town tomorrow night. Is that true? Madeleine Albright. In 1992, early 1993, Madeleine Albright called up General Sullivan, who called up General Paul Greenberg, who called up us and said, yo guys, go, yes sir, can you guys write a no-bid contract for Halliburton? You betcha we can. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, the original no-bid contract for Halliburton for the cleanup of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, written by my team, passed up through Madeleine Albright, given over to the Emirate of Kuwait, and awarded to guess who? Yay, Rod Dickey. Well, we kept working on things, trying to get everything together. In 1993, a U.S. Army doctor, a colonel, my best friend, issued a directive called the Protocol for Monitoring Gulf War Veterans with Embedded Depleted Uranium Fragments. Now, I do know that we have one person in here whose father was part of Wild Bill Donovan's group. Okay? I don't know how many other people we know have World War II history. How many people know of the doctor named Mangala? Okay. This is the Mangala Directive. This is the deliberate order to leave the uranium shrapnel embedded in the U.S. personnel wounded during friendly fire and enemy engagements as a consequence of Desert Storm in order to, quote, quantify and document the toxicological and heavy metal toxicity of radiological cancer and tissue necrosis risks of embedded uranium fragments by, 1, measuring and documenting uranium levels in soldiers using in vitro and in vivo techniques, determining the parameters and models needed to translate uranium levels in the body, estimates for increased cancer risk from this exposure, comparing the clinical, this is neat, comparing the clinical course of the body's response to depleted uranium fragments with that of other non-depleted uranium fragments to determine whether clinically significant differences exist due to either the chemical or radiological properties of the depleted uranium, and determining the risk of chronic kidney toxicity due to long-term exposure. Well, they never told me for 2.5 years. I'm doing all the research as director. I had, I think, 20 kidney surgeries. I was bleeding. I'm out there doing the research, and I'm bleeding at the time that I'm doing the research in the desert. DOE got bothered. They couldn't understand this stuff. The reality is, the use of uranium munitions thoroughly contaminates air, water, and soil. The reality is, the United States Army, in its common task training, that is required for all military personnel to complete prior to deployment and every year thereof while they're in the military, states very specifically, if you go within DU, thou shalt wear respiratory and skin protection. Thou shalt provide medical care. Thou shalt clean it up. And it also states very specifically in that common task manual that uranium contamination makes food and water unusable for eternity. Now, if you know of the fine work of Karen Parker from up by San Francisco with the United Nations, That is one of the prerequisites, and that is one of the key reasons why the United Nations ruled uranium weapons of mass destruction illegal years ago. But my old bosses don't care. Because in March of 1991, you guys know who Tommy Franks is? Yeah. Tommy and Brown gave me a memorandum called the Los Alamos Memorandum. It was a direct order to lie about the adverse health and environmental effects of uranium munitions in order to keep them in the arsenal. Duh. So anyhow, we've been working on this for years, trying to get everything cleaned up, trying to get everything taken care of. General Eric Shinseki. You guys all know him too. He's the guy that led us into all these wars when he's Chief of Staff of the Army. He's now retired someplace back in Hawaii. Hopefully he's out there surfing, hanging 10. He should be one of the 10 that's hanged. In 1993, General Eric Shinseki signed the direct order to provide medical care to all DU casualties, to clean up all the environmental mess, and to put together all the training and education necessary such that anybody that comes in contact would know what to do. Thank you, General Shinseki. He followed my staff study, which is an Army report that officers do when they know a problem and they recommend solutions. I got them all up here, but they don't exist. I love it. So anyhow, on August 1st of 1994, this long-haired hippie was over there in the physics lab. We're building muon detection chambers for Fermi National Laboratories for the top quark project, right? We're just having fun building equipment. And they call me on the telephone and says, yo, hello, 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 hello. Thank you very much. And we keep doing all this stuff. That's how we got the Desert Storm. And then I'm over in chemistry, and all of a sudden they say, y'all coming back on active duty again in 1994. Oh, wait a minute. I went on active duty originally on December 7th of 1967. I got out in September and Tuesday of 1971. 3 days later, I started college. I was not a human being. They put nice signs up in the dormitory. Beware. Don't go near. Because we didn't have clothes. We weren't humans. We didn't smell human. So here we come. And then in 1974, I got recalled active duty again for a summer. It was the end of the Vietnam War. They needed us. You know, y'all come on back. We need you. Come on back. Then it all ended, and I said, bye-bye. Here I'm going back on active duty again in 1994. You have to understand, a full career in the military is 20 years. 1967, that's almost 30 years. And I'm back on active duty again as director of the DU project. Of course, the Army claims that I didn't do it today. Thank you. They must shoot the messengers because the message is very simple. The use of uranium weapons is illegal. The use of uranium weapons leave contamination on air, water, and soil, for which the Department of Defense, NATO, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Marine Corps, Semper Fi. How many Marines we got in here? Hey, Marine's a Marine for life, right, ma'am? That Marine Corps song, you snap to attention still, don't you, ma'am? Were you an officer or enlisted, ma'am? Enlisted. That's just part of it. For those of you who have never been to Washington, D.C. in 8th and I, you must do that once in your lifetime. If you have never seen the Marine Corps drill team and the Marine Corps band perform, you must do that once in your lifetime. Yes, would you agree, ma'am? Yes, ma'am. She's shaking her head big time. It's incredible. When we did all the testing, Nevada test site, which you just saw, I didn't ask for any Army gunners. If I want gunners to fire Abrams, Chains, and Bradley fire rounds, and I want them to put these rounds in the palm of a hand, you know who I asked, ma'am? The United States Marine Corps from 29 palms. They don't miss. That's who the best of the best is. And what we learned when we did the research, that the contamination was so extensive that you could not clean it up. What we learned with working with the radiological equipment assigned by the U.S. Army, assigned by the Department of Energy, is that you could not effectively quantify or even find the contamination. It couldn't be done. So we're trying to get everybody taken care of. I'm sicker than a dog. They took, I pissed in a bottle we call a radiobioassay. In order to determine how much radioactive materials you have, you do what's called a radiobioassay. And the radiobioassay consists of, number one, a nasal pharyngeal swab. When the doctor's swabbing your throat for strep, that's a nasal and pharyngeal swab. Everybody here has had that swab, except they put it up the nose and in the back of the throat. Then you urinate in a bottle for 24 hours and you defecate in a box for 24 hours, and all the stuff is supposed to be shipped off. The direct order is thou shalt do it within 24 hours. Not 15 years later, 24 hours. And it's not happening. Willie, where's Willie? Is he here? Okay. The 442nd New York National Guard Military Police Unit. Those are the heroes that survived the World Trade Center. They were activated and they were deployed. They were sent to Samarra in Iraq, into an area contaminated with uranium. They were not provided the training. They were not provided the equipment. The area was not cleaned up. Several of the soldiers came back, and they, i.e., conceived children on that 1 week leave they had during the year, who were born with horrible birth defects. And those soldiers are ill and sick. The commander of the unit developed a tumor in his throat in exactly the same location, in the same duration, with the same incubation period as the major that I slept in the tent with, whose cot was at the front of the tent, and I was the second in from Gulf War I. No doubt in my mind. And when we asked those guys to provide medical care at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, General Kevin Kiley, you all seen his name in the newspapers lately? The Surgeon General for the U.S. Army, who was the commander of Walter Reed, denied the medical care. And the same as they did when I was sick and getting problems, and my guys were sick. And April, God bless April, she was getting sick. Colonel Charles Ingle, who's at Walter Reed, tried to convince all of us you're crazy. You didn't happen. You didn't see what occurred. What you saw didn't happen. And he told the 442nd guys that didn't happen. Reality is. Hardcore reality is. The Army didn't like it once I told them they couldn't use uranium munitions. The leaders of the Army, Assistant Secretary of the Army Fats, Dr. Bernard Rotzker, now Dr. Michael Kilpatrick, Colonel Bob Cherry, Colonel Ed Battle, Colonel Eric Daxon. We were all friends once. And they didn't like it when the director told them they could no longer use uranium munitions because we have no effective way to clean it up. We have no effective medical care. And what they did to me personally was incredible. The Department of Energy took my urinalysis in November of 1994. They had the test results back in March 1st of 1995. And it was until August of 1997 they told me that my urinalysis, I was excreting uranium at 5,000 times the permissible level. Kidney surgeries, respiratory problems is all documented. The Department of Defense tells you we're not sick, we're sick. Jerry Wheat. Yeah, I got it on my watch up here. I'm a scuba diver, or was. Jerry Wheat, Bradley Fighting Vehicle, Desert Storm. The Abrams tank guys go, I got a target, pop, pop, boom. They shoot his Bradley Fighting Vehicle 2 times with 120 millimeter rounds. Well, the driver died right away. The Army wants me to tell him where I buried him. He's in a bag in the rest of the vehicle over in Iraq. I ain't going to tell him. And Jerry Wheat ended up with shrapnel. I went to his commander, I set up his medical care and said, thou shalt, here's who you do it, here's the medical care, the doctor's waiting for him, it's down in Riyadh, take care of him. We got the doctors back in Landstuhl. You guys know about that rat-infested, roach-infested cock thing, right, too? A lot of schools we're taking the kids to now. Real neat. Jerry never got his medical care. And eventually Jerry developed a tumor surrounding the uranium embedded in his left shoulder. And so we're up in Washington, D.C., Christopher Shays, Bernie Sanders. God bless Chris Shays and Bernie Sanders. I don't always agree with them, but they've attempted to do what's right. We're up there, and we're doing a hearing, a conference and everything, and Jerry and I and Eric Daxon and Kilpatrick, we're all up there talking. And Jerry's got his arm in a sling because they just did the surgery to remove the tumor off of his left shoulder out of the bone that had the uranium embedded in it. And Daxon and Kilpatrick sat right there and said, Jerry, in order for you to get your medical care, get your VA disability, Jerry, you're going to have to prove that the uranium that's embedded in the tumor caused the tumor. Reality is, here comes David. Ladies and gentlemen, David, come here. David's wife, Joyce Riley, is not here. How many people know that his wife is an Air Force medevac nurse that took care of the casualties and saved lives? You go home, give her a hug from me.
I'll give her one back for you.
You hear Joyce and O'Reilly, but you don't know that Joyce saved lives because she's a medevac nurse. You guys on the website, there's pictures of her, isn't there?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Go take a look. So anyhow, what we're doing is we're coming down to the whole nitty-gritty. The United States Department of Defense, the British Ministry of Defense, the Australian Defense, the Canadians know that uranium munitions are illegal. They know there is no known respiratory skin protection to protect anybody in their use. They do know that it's absolutely required by regulation and written orders that thou shalt provide prompt and effective medical care for all casualties, and that means not only U.S., that means enemy, because under Geneva Convention, when you blow up the enemy and they live and you get them, you got to take care of them. But you also got to provide it to all the civilians and non-combatants. And it ain't happening. When was it? 3 or 4 weeks ago, we attempted to get Mikey to come on the radio simultaneously with Joyce and you and I.
Oh, Mikey.
Mikey Kilpatrick.
Mikey.
He refused to do it. The Deputy Secretary of Defense refused to come on the radio show with us because we would have wiped him up. He knows. He knows it. He knows it. They won't address it. So we've got that. It continues to this day, ladies and gentlemen. The question is, what do we do? And the question is, what are the consequences thereof? What you have to do is you have to contact your elected official and everybody, the president, the vice president, your congressmen, your senators, and you can pull it off the websites. It's on Beyond Treason. You buy this Beyond Treason, man, I'll autograph it over there, and you got all the orders, you got all the regs, you got all the written directives on that CD, don't you, David?
There's a DVD and a CD-ROM in that package, and I've only got about 4 or 5 left here, but please visit beyondtreason.com, or you can contact us at the Power Hour.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, reality is, in the newspaper, I haven't got one today, but I got one the other day. They said there was a total of 23,000 wounded in action and 3,000 dead, correct? Yeah. That's what they tell you. That's what they tell you, but that's what Mikey wants you to know. Now, Billy Winkenwerder, Deputy Secretary of Defense, got fired. Secretary Harvey got fired. Supposedly Kylie's going to get fired. Mikey's in hiding. Ladies and gentlemen, the true casualty numbers, Operation Desert Storm. 696,842 of us participated in Desert Storm between April and May of 1990 and the fall of 1991. As of November 30th, 80,000 of us have died. 275,485 have applied for permanent medical care with the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. 209,000 have been awarded permanent medical care with the VA for life. However, you have to fight for your medical care. 36,000 claims are pending, and 30,000 claims have been denied. And they are continuing to do that. And they delay and deny. And that's what Walter Reed and all the stuff on the news was about. When we go to Gulf War II, combination, from April and May of 1990 through November 30th of 2006, 1,129,340 of our sons and daughters have gone to the Persian Gulf. As of November 30th, only 954,000 are left alive. Y'all do the numbers. 180,000 of my brothers and sisters have died. 400,000 have applied for permanent disability with the VA. They've awarded to 309,000. 51,000 are waiting. 39,000 denied care. Now that's just those gone to the VA. Now everybody comes back, gets medical care. Okay, what we have is 205,000 individuals that served in Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, that are now listed disease and non-battle injury, that have gone to the VA for medical care. They don't have to apply to the VA for a disability. I got 21,000 parasitic diseases. I got 1,500 confirmed malignant cancers. I got 36,000 metabolic. I got 61,000 of us with neurological. If I got any physicians or nurses, come on up here and you can do a neuro on me and you'll find out what happens. Reality is. So what do you want to do? Number one, we have to ensure that medical care is provided to everybody that serves in our nation, whether it be from Vietnam and Korea and World War II all the way to the present. Number two, we make sure that uranium munitions are never used. Number three, we have to make sure the environmental contamination is cleaned up. Okay? And what I did with our local recruiters the other day, I sent them an email and I copied everybody, the newspapers, TV, everybody in our old area, and I said, you know, before you enlist any more soldiers and send them over a cannon fodder, you ought to make sure that the ones that are already over there get medical care and they're taken care of. And if you don't want to do that, last thing, it's very simple. It's very, very simple. I'm a warrior, ladies and gentlemen. If there's a viable threat against our nation, they better get out of the way. There has been no viable threat against our nation that threatened to take away our rights, our Bill of Rights, destroy our government, since the War of 1812 when we fought the British. So all of us, they told the Willard soldiers, y'all go into war to defend the Constitution and protect our rights. I'm sorry, guys, we got lied to. We were lied to because the reality is. So I made a conscious choice. I'm a warrior. Several years ago, I went over with the United Nations, UNESCO, Child and the Family to talk about the effects of war on children in Athens, Greece. And as we sat there and we ended the conference, the Prime Minister of Greece was up there, the head of UNESCO was up there. I'm sitting off to the right side. They have all the speakers to the right. In the center is all the Nobel laureates from the world, the leaders of the world, almost every country in the world except the United States and England. I wonder why. And off to the right was the things. And all of a sudden, as the last comment was made, all of a sudden, off to the right, this beautiful woman, this fantastic woman, raised a voice in song. And that one single voice was joined by the voices of over 4,000 individuals in all the languages of the world. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a warrior. I was an enlisted, I was an NCO, I was a commissioned officer. Today, I made the choice some years ago to be a warrior for peace. Anybody want to join me?
Too good, man. Ladies and gentlemen, microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, folks, this man is not only a warrior, but he is a hero. Amen. It is his voice that is basically leading the charge against any nation that uses illegal nuclear weapons. And this is a scourge for all mankind, because it's the gift that keeps on giving. As he say, for 4.5 billion years, and after that period of time, it's only half as radioactive. That's why it's called half-life. Now, we have a lot of folks that are serving their country right now. Some of them served in uniform, past tense. Some are serving in uniform, and some have never worn a uniform. I never wore a uniform. I grew up in the 60s and 70s in the Vietnam era, and I'll tell you, the last thing that I wanted was be sent off to Vietnam. And when the lottery came into effect, my number was 234, and I never got drafted, and I didn't serve. But damn it, I'm going to serve now, and I'll serve until I die. Now, folks, before we're going to take a little time here to let Wendy from the Granada Forum speak. But before we do, how many folks were at the banquet last night? Okay, about half of you. The other half, I would like to address you. Unfortunately, you didn't get to hear William Rodriguez give his testimony, nor did you hear April Gallup give her testimony. Now, most of you are familiar with Willie's story. He's been out there screaming from the rooftops about the truth at the Trade Center on September 11th. But now joining him is a woman who has made the sacrifice and continues to make the sacrifice. I've had the opportunity to speak with her, meet with her, and she obviously is a veteran, and I'm sure all of you folks know how Joyce and I feel about veterans. She is alone. She has her son, Elijah, and it's her responsibility to take care of her child because she is a single mom. She doesn't have a family. She has no brothers, no sisters, and she is disabled at this point. And in the time that I spent with her in the past couple of hours, I'm finding out yet again another story of yet another veteran who has been lied to, denied treatment. They had her military records, her medical records are gone. They can't find them. Now, where have we heard that before? Where have we heard that before, folks?
Thank you, Mikey.
Thank you, Mikey Kilpatrick. That's right. Now, Doug, you know what Joyce and I have been doing for the past 10 years.
We all have, yes.
Okay? Now, damn it, it makes me so mad. It breaks my heart to hear these stories about these veterans that were willing to give their lives for their country, and they come back and don't get squat from their government. 75% of the homeless in this country are veterans. How disgusting is that? And I'm sorry, yeah, I make jokes, you know, and this is a side of me that maybe I don't like to share, but damn it, it's so important that these people get help. So all of you folks that were not here for the banquet, we have to keep William and we have to keep April up and going. Now, I've been to William's home. I visited with him a couple months ago. He lives in a one-room basement apartment in New Jersey. He doesn't have a kitchen. He's got a one-room apartment with a bed and a kitchenette and a sink and a bathroom over to the side. He doesn't have the stuff people say, oh, well, he's traveling around the world and he's talking to... Folks, he's doing that out of donations. And that's why I'm here to ask you right now, because now adding to William Rodriguez's voice, we have another golden voice, an articulate voice, a voice of experience, a voice that was there at the Pentagon, and a voice that we desperately need to spread this truth and to spread the word and let America and the rest of the world know that this regime we're living under is being controlled by the corporate Borg. They don't care about peace or people or progress. Their primary purpose is profits. Folks, I'm going to ask you, and even if you were at the banquet last night and you donated, I'm going to beg that you please fill this jar because they are not able to help themselves. They can't do it. They need us to support them. So please, dig down, pass this jar around, and please fill it up, and we will split that money between Willie Rodriguez and April Gallup. We've got to help them.
One thing that everybody needs to know, okay? I have a 40% disability. I was a major. My grand total income as a result of my disability after over 30 years is $560 a month. April doesn't even come close because she was an E4. Reality is,
folks, what you're seeing here is your country crumbling beneath your feet. Well, in a sense, yeah, I would like to see when somebody says good, but not at the expense of those that were willing to put on the uniform to support and defend this Constitution. Because the sad fact is that these veterans understand what those words mean. So many of them understand that. And after they've done their tour of duty, they come home and they find out what the real meaning of an army of one is all about, because they're on their own. Well, I will not have it. And I hope that you don't have it either. Please donate, dig deep, and help keep this funding. And if there's a way that you can tithe on a monthly basis or something like that, we got to figure out some sort of a way to keep an income for these people so that they can stay out there and they can pay their bills and take care of their kids. And they can go out there and spread this word that so desperately needs to be spread. So I don't mean to be up here on a soapbox or anything, because I sure as hell ain't about me, folks. It's not about the I, me, my thing. Please purge that from your minds if that's what you're thinking. It's about them. We need them.
The military provides you a housing allowance in addition to subsistence for food, in addition to basic pay. Once you are wounded and you have been given a disability, if you have a 30% disability or greater, then you can receive medical care from the military. If you have less than 30%, you're on your own. And you might, with 30%, get a couple $100 a month if you're lower enlisted. You have no more housing allowance. So the question is, how do you live if you have a family on $400 a month? I'd like to see anybody here try in California. That's the reality of what happens to 500,000 of our sons and daughters. You don't believe it? Come on up here. You can read it. Go to the VA website and pull it up yourself.
Well, start to inform the kids not to sign up for the military.
Exactly.
That's right.
$22.8 billion cut from the VA the first week of the war.
That's right.
Where's that coming from?
That's right. Where's that coming from? Let me tell you a little bit about what this war is really all about while they're passing that jar around. Now, for those of you that have that listen to the Power Hour, and again, how many Power Team members do we have in the audience? I know we don't get out here in California very much. Please check out our website, thepowerhour.com, and you may want to listen to the broadcast, as we talk about all the news they hope and pray you never hear. But I want to share with you one of the news stories that's been sitting in my gullet for about a year and a half now. And this hopefully will derail the argument that some people make. Oh, the war is about freedom and protecting America's our rights and all that kind of stuff. If you're buying that, well, then you're still buying the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, and the Easter Bunny. The bottom line here, let me share with you a little story about what this war is really all about. In the summer of '05, I think it was, the Houston Chronicle ran a story about a no-bid contract that was awarded to, say it with me, Halliburton. Now, this contract was for transport of 86,000 gallons of liquid propane cooking fuel to Baghdad. Now, think for 1 second, 86,000 gallons of liquid propane fuel. Now, I wasn't sure how much that is, so I called up a local propane company. And I asked the guy, I said, how much or how many trucks would it take to transport 86,000 gallons? And he says, well, usually they have a capacity of between 10 and 11,000 gallons, but you never fill them all the way up. So I said, well, would you say it's safe to say an estimate of around 10? He says, yeah, 10,000. So I said, okay, well, let's say 9,000. Okay, how many trucks would it take to transport 86,000 gallons of liquid propane fuel? And he says, probably about 10 trucks. Okay, I said, well, how much would it cost to transport it this distance? Now, this no-bid contract was not to transport this fuel from the United States to Baghdad. It was to transport it from Kuwait to Baghdad. Sort of like driving from here to Las Vegas. What, about 300 or 400 miles, right? Okay? So the question is, what would be a legitimate charge for Halliburton to charge the U.S. government, i.e. taxpayers? What would be a legitimate charge to transport that stuff that distance? Okay? Well, he told me about, probably about $1,000 a truck. I said, well, you got 10 trucks? He says, yeah, $30,000. I said, well, this is a government contract. He says, well, why you could double that or maybe triple it. I said, so maybe a total of $10,000? He says, yeah. $10,000 would be a legitimate charge for a government contract to transport it that distance. You know what Halliburton charged? $27.5 million freaking dollars. Now, don't tell me that they don't have enough money to be able to give to the veterans. Don't tell me that they can't afford to give them the health care that they need. Don't tell me that we can't pay the debt when we've got these pigs at the trough. This is why this is so important that this information get out there. Now, before we go on to our next speaker, Paymon, are we going to have Wendy come up? Okay.